Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Careers in Finance, brought to you by Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. You can go to valuationmasterclass.com/bootcamp or scan the QR code to learn more. My name is Andrew Stotz, and I want to welcome you all here. I'm looking forward to our conversation coming up, and I welcome everybody to ask any questions that you may have about careers in finance. The purpose of Careers in Finance is to discuss the careers of various financial professionals to understand, what do they do? How did they get to that job? Is that job suitable for me? And think about your own career in finance and where you want that to go. Today, we have a special guest, a good friend of mine, and I want to bring him in right now. Here he is. There is Ved. Good to see you, and welcome to Careers in Finance. Let's just kick off by maybe introduce yourself and then tell us what you are doing in the world of finance right now.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me. And let me just say, this is a wonderful platform. If I had something of this nature when I was starting off my finance career, it would have been very useful. So I hope it's useful to the people who are listening to us today as well. In introducing myself, so my name is Ved. Full name is Ved Vyas. I'm a Thai Indian. So I was born originally in India. I moved here when I was quite young. So I've been in Bangkok for around 28 years now. I've lived in various different cities. I've been in Bombay, in London, in Geneva, in Phuket, but I've spent the most amount of time here in Bangkok. And this is definitely where my heart lives. This is where it feels like home. So Bangkok is pretty much my home. I completed school in Bangkok, and then I went to university in London. I was at Imperial College London, where I studied electrical engineering, and I was graduating in the year 2007. So this is 16 years ago. And at that time, it was very popular for us science and math students to move into the world of finance. And graduates at that time were really looking forward to get into private equity, into investment banking. So some of my friends recommended that path to me when I was in London. And that's how I started my finance journey. I worked in London for a couple of years. Then I moved to Bangkok, where I worked as a stockbroker at Maybank Securities. This is where there was a bit of an overlap with Andrew as well. And after having worked in the finance world for about 5, 6 years, there was a period where I did some soul searching, and I wanted to really ask myself, hey, is this what I want to do? There was a part of me which was feeling a little dissatisfied with the corporate world, with the rat race, so to speak, and I wanted to explore the artistic side of me. So I went to Bombay for a couple of years where I studied acting. So this is an unusual path along my journey. uh, I know we're talking about finance, but I think those couple of
Mm.
years learning performance skills has definitely helped me in my professional life, in my personal life, in understanding myself as well. And then in 2015, I came back to Thailand, and I worked in wealth management for several years, initially based out of Phuket, which was a beautiful experience. And then I moved with that same company to Switzerland for a while. Over the last couple of years, I've primarily been in the wealth management, asset management industry, and then worked as a strategy consultant for a couple of years. And currently, I am in the real estate industry. So I work for a real estate development company as the chief financial officer. We are an unusual setup because, unlike most established real estate companies, we have a bit more of a startup mindset. We want to position ourselves as the only developer in the country that focuses on the luxury segment only. So we want to not diversify our portfolio as you would usually do as a real estate company, but do one thing and do it well. And that presents its own unique set of challenges, which I have absolutely enjoyed. I've learned about a new industry because I did not really come from a real estate background. What I brought to the table in my current role was more an understanding of the capital markets, of how investors tend to think, of how funding works, and a certain degree of common sense that you pick up along the journey. And that's what I've been executing. My role has been very rewarding. I get to work with the owner's hat on. I get to work as the CEO's right hand person. She thinks of the big picture, the vision, the strategy, and my job is to understand, to imbibe that strategy and translate that into numbers that make sense for the company, and make sure that we continue to motor along towards our dreams, but be also financially successful along the way. So that's been the crux of it. I'm sure we'll go
Mm,
into some more details over there, but that's me.
definitely.
Yeah, right
That
now.
what a journey. That's fascinating. Before we get into the next questions, let's just welcome everybody. And we have Tuluwase, who's saying hi from Nigeria, I suspect. And also, yep, we have Francis, who's saying hi, and also Mercy. Mercy is one of our graduates from Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp and Valuation Masterclass Professional, an impressive woman. So welcome to everybody, and make sure if you've got questions, feel free to ask those questions and share your thoughts. So um, let's talk about, like, what is the role of a CFO? You talked about the owner having the vision, and then you're supporting that. Does that mean that you're making forecasts, or does that mean that you're raising money, or does that mean you're trying to put the vision into numbers? Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing.
Yeah, so there's some traditional elements of being a CFO, and I think over the last decade or so that role has evolved a little bit. So the traditional elements of a CFO would be to have an oversight over the accounts, to see how the financial performance of the company is going. The way that my owner likes to look at it is she calls me the financial doctor of the company. So I kind of give a periodic checkup on how the business is doing, using the numbers as the tool to measure whether we're hitting our targets. So, yeah, a bit like a doctor would do so, or a personal trainer would help you along the journey that you've kind of set yourself. Um, Budgeting, planning, forecasting. So, budgeting for how much money do we plan to spend on marketing, on promotions? What should be our sales target in a given year? How much should we be spending on manpower? All of these things. And how does all of that fall within the big picture of the vision and the direction that we have set ourselves as the company? Are all of these little segments of it, or individual line items that we are trying to target for a forecast, are they aligned with that big picture strategy or not? The role of the CFO has changed a little bit in recent years, also because the working style across most companies and especially startups has become more lean, more agile. So it's not okay just to kind of be fixed into your silo, and me as a CFO just thinking about numbers, and the CEO thinking about strategy, and the marketing team thinking about marketing. It helps a lot more if everybody can kind of pool their ideas and really think as though they were the owners themselves. And I think that's something that's really encouraged at the company that I am right now, where there is an opportunity for me to think even before an instruction's been given to me, of like, okay, exploring, say for example, business development opportunities, or working closely with the sales team to come up with what should be the next sales promotion, and really thinking outside the box, being creative around that as well. And and rather than being reactive, because the old school way of budgeting, for example, would be, okay, here is last year's expenses and incomes, and now we are going to kind of use that as a template for how much we're going to be doing in the future. But being a bit more dynamic, being a bit more nimble, and also taking the initiative of telling the owner, hey, you know what, when we last spoke about it 3 months ago, we thought that the company should be going in this direction, but the recent data that we are getting from the market and from our performance indicates that maybe there is a different business stream that will be more profitable for us and actually enhance our success along the direction that we have set for ourselves. So it's really um, morphing for most of the C-suite to kind of take more of an owner's perspective rather than an employee's perspective, and I think that's the challenge that I've enjoyed the most.
I'm kind of thinking back to our Maybank days, and one of the things about working on the sell side or on the buy side is that you're always outside of the businesses. You're an outsider making an assessment of the business. And for my career, I enjoyed that role. I also enjoy the role in my own business, in my coffee business, Coffee Works. I enjoy the role of being an insider to discussing exactly what we're doing, going through the numbers and all that. But I'm curious for people out there who are not sure. Do I want to be an outsider analyzing a business? Or do I want to be an insider working on the business, working in the business? What you've been on both sides of that, how would you describe the differences?
Yeah, I think being on the sell side, where you've got clients who you're advising or you're adding value through your services, the advantage of that is that you get a much broader view at things. Your day to day is not completely consumed by looking at just one company and its problems. You're looking across the board and you're looking at different industries. So back when, say for example, we were analyzing stocks and we were trying to advise our clients and add value to them by telling them which stocks to invest in, which stocks not to invest in, we were kind of developing an understanding, a broad understanding of firstly how the world works. Within that, how do the capital markets work? And within that, how do all these different industries work? What are the key value drivers over there? And I think that sort of an experience gives you a good starting point. Like I said, a big value contribution that you would make to any company would be by bringing, first and foremost, a certain amount of common sense to the picture. It is amazing how often that's missing from so many places, right? But I think if you've looked at all these different problems from different angles, and I think that's the advantage of having spent some time on the sell side. I'm not necessarily advocating for one side is better than the other, but if we are to compare the two, I think the sell side definitely gives you a lot more of a broader perspective. It also, maybe the intensity of your job is a bit higher on the sell side
Mm.
because it's a far more competitive industry. So you kind of see this transition a lot of times where professionals, they start off in the sales side and then go and enjoy the nice positions on the buy side. And it's worked out. It was not intentional necessarily on my part, but that's how it's worked out for me as well. The other thing that I'd like to point out, which I think is sort of common if you want to be successful, whether you're on the sell side or the buy side, is I think more than specific skill set, um, in my opinion, and this is something I definitely look for when I'm hiring people, the right mindset helps a lot. So skills are very important, but if you've got the mindset, if you want to be of use to yourself and to the society, you'll pick up the skills. So life will put you in different situations. You try and put your best foot forward every time, try and bring the best version of you to every problem that you're facing. And I think that helps tremendously. It might seem like a very okay, yeah, but how does it fit into the big picture? The big picture is made up of all those little victories of like, okay, every day you were faced with something, and did you do the best of your efforts, or did you try and cut corners and deceive yourself in the process? So I think being honest, being authentic to yourself, and doing the best to your ability, and also doing being kind to yourself along the journey is quite important. And the other thing that I found, which has been useful across both, has been your ability to listen. And I think this is something that I've definitely learned from you, Andrew. And I think this is what we're doing on this um, conversation of ours as well. If you can drop everything else, a lot of times people have preconceived notions and agendas. If you can drop everything else and just be there, like for me, if I'm having a conversation with my CEO, for example, or even if I'm having a conversation with my manager, for example, it doesn't matter if I can sit with them for even a 10-minute conversation and just be really present there without any agenda and listen to what their needs are and then deliver on those needs, then you are doing wonders to the world.
It's such a great point that most people don't realize, but very small number of people nowadays can sit down and focus in, listen to someone, figure out what their problem is, the challenges that they're facing, and then think, how can I, how can I help in this situation? And that's ultimately, that turns out to be the best leader, in an organization. So it's a great, great point, particularly in this age of distraction. I see we got uh, Amit here saying,
Yeah,
awesome.
Amit's a friend. Yeah, Amit's a close friend of mine. Hi,
Yes,
Amit.
yes, the fan club puts in a little bit. Um, it raises another question where I see the distraction that kids and young people are facing now is tremendous, and it's not just young people. Ved, when I go out to speak at events, at school, at university, I always ask the same thing: raise your hand if you are not addicted to your phone. Nobody raises it. I mean, we have a highly addictive device right there all the time. And for young people, it COVID even made it even worse of how it just all consumed them. But also for senior executives, it's easy to get just as addicted, just as caught up in the mobile phone. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, you've talked about this kind of focus and concentration, which I think is a key thing. But maybe talk about how you guys deal with the distractions that phones and things like that can bring.
Yeah, see, this is a nice one. Um, Yeah, first I want to touch a little bit upon on what you said that when we look around in the society, we see a certain amount, certain sort of a trend out there, and it's a culture. It's called the hustle culture, right? You just got to perform every minute, and people would come to any social setting or professional setting or even personal setting with their families, where they've got this idea of, okay, here's three things that I read this morning which really made an impact on me, and now I want to disseminate that to the world, and that's somehow seen as a victory. um, and I think, yeah, we are evolving as a species. I think technology is definitely having an impact on us, but the way that I would go about thinking about it, and the reason why I say there is a lot of value if you can just calm everything down and just be there for the other person, is by having a certain element of empathy. Say if you are talking to somebody and you've got a burning need and you want the other person to help you, would you want them to be sitting there thinking about all their great ideas and what makes them a great person and what helps them put forward their best profile in front of you? Or would you want them to listen? And if the answer to that is yes, I would like people to listen to me, then you got to take the first step yourself. So, if, say, for example, and here's the other beauty of it, if, say, for example, you being distracted by your mobile phone or you being really pumped about the hustle culture and wanting to just compete and put just talk about yourself all the time is working out great for you and you're feeling a great sense of purpose and peace in your heart with that, then all the power to you. But chances are that if you're kind of faking it out there all the time, you'll start to feel a bit empty and a bit hollow, and that
Mm.
will lead you to some soul searching, and then I think the simple truths of life, they kind of prevail for a reason, which is empathy, which is kindness, which is just being human.
When I listen to podcasts, I always get annoyed if the host is constantly interrupting and speaking. And therefore, on all of my podcasts and other interviewing that I do, I really try just to be quiet. And it's such a great lesson. And I really recommend it for everybody who's out, who's listening and viewing this. And, you know, basically, the way you do that is you just talk to anybody and you try to just shut your mouth. Now, there is a little bit of an advanced technique, and that's this. I think I got it. Have a clipboard
Hmm.
or a notepad, and then when you talk to them, take notes because it's very difficult to speak and write at the same time.
Yeah.
It forces you to listen.
Yep.
And I'm just curious, like, how does that? skill help you as a manager and as a leader? Because I'm sure, you know, there's, as a leader in a business, you want to set the direction and all that, and you want to speak out and be seen as someone who knows what he's talking about, knows where things are going. But you've got to also balance that with the fact that people need you.
Yeah, I think making a right sort of an impression, especially if you are in a competitive industry, especially if you're trying to sell your services. Let's say, for example, you're on the sell side and you would like your client to buy your services, right? That's the ultimate aim of the game. If you want to impress somebody, you got to listen. So it's not working against the grain of it at all. It's actually empowering you. And this is something that so Amit here is also common friends with this friend who I'm about to talk about here. It's my best friend in London, Gibran. He spent several years working as a consultant. He was advising the top financial institutions around the world on their IT setup and their systems and stuff like that. And before I joined the consulting industry, I always looked up to him because he gave me these pointers and he told me, we go to the clients, and sometimes the consultants would already have an agenda. They're like, okay, these are the things that we've got to sell to this client, and we got to make sure that this happens and this happens and this happens, and there's a pitch deck with 80 slides already ready, and we're going to give our credentials and all that sort of stuff. um, but if you pay attention to what the client's telling you and describing their problem, that description and that definition already has embedded in it 98% of the solution. And so often, because the agenda is to kind of push your services and close a deal in the way that you thought it should close, you lose out on all the golden nuggets that were presented to you along the way. So I think having a little trust in yourself, trust in your team, and that trust is not just a blind trust, right? So again,
Mm.
going back to Gibran's case, he made it an agenda for himself that the way that I'm going to be a good leader is by hiring the smartest people from Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, the leading researchers and scientists in the field of AI, in blockchain technology, and things like that. And I know I have the humility to know that I don't know everything about these fields, and these fields are so dynamic, they're changing every day. But I'm going to hire all these smart people and I'm going to let them tell me what they think is the best thing. And my role is going to be, as their leader, to just empower them. And when they come and explain these things to me, I will try and understand them in layman's terms and communicate these layman terms to my clients, because that's what they understand. And if I can successfully do this process, imagine my growth as a leader. And then if you top that up by being there and you listening to clients who don't normally get listened to because they're bombarded by all these consultants and bankers, and you are this rare person that they meet who is actually paying interest and not just faking that interest. You're genuinely
Mm.
taking interest in what they have to say, because you're getting excited about the problem as it is presenting itself to you, not the problem that you want to imagine and have already solved last night when you were preparing for this meeting, but the problem that's presenting itself to you real time, and you're like, oh right, okay, that's pretty cool. All right, I didn't know that that was happening, and now I have got this as a proposed solution to you. Then you've hit all the boxes, and that's impressing the client, that's closing a successful deal, and that's growing yourself as a professional and as a human being.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that it made me think about. There's a great book. I got it uh, over on my bookshelf over there called Gap Selling. And he talks about the gap between where you are today and where the client is today versus where do they want to be. The gap is the pain. And what he talks about is just focus on the pain.
Yeah.
And, and I have a way of doing it where when I talk with someone, I have a series of questions. And I just start off say, hey, would you mind if I asked you some questions? Well, who's going to resist that? And then they see I'm taking notes as I'm talking and I'm listening. They see I'm taking notes, and I always say, okay, so what you said was da, 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 and I'm reading what notes I've taken, And then they may clarify, no, well, actually, I didn't mean that. I meant this or that. And that, I think, is, taking notes and listening. And as you said, the seeds of success. Another people know what the problem is. It's very rare that they don't know what the problem is. Occasionally, you have to go in and figure out what the problem really is. But most people know what the problem is. If you're overweight, you know what the problem is. If you're not living a healthy life, you know what the problem is. If you're not getting the reviews that you want to get or the scores that you want to get, you know the problem. But a good consultant really digs in to try to really explore that, together, and then help solve that problem. So love it. You also made me think about another great teacher I had, another book. Uh, this book is called Out of the Crisis by a guy named Dr. W. Edwards Deming,
Right.
who was the father of the quality movement. And from him, I learned about systems thinking. And systems thinking tells us that there is a system, and the definition of a system is that it has multiple parts. And what makes it a system is that you cannot adjust one part without having an impact on all other parts.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's not a system. It's
Yeah.
a separate. And what I learned was that true success in business comes from coordinating effort, coordinating energy. And I say to be successful, you need the right leader and the right direction. The right leader doesn't always go the right direction, but the right leader going the right direction. And then the secret sauce is the coordination amongst the team. If the management team is broken and splintered and they don't cooperate, you're never going to get to where you want to go. But if you can organize that coordination between all the different departments, then you've got something magical. What's been your experience, in the inside companies trying to figure out how do we get the most out of all the different people we have here?
Yeah, so there's two parts of it. The first one that I want to talk about, I found that fascinating, the system kind of coordinating together. That's a mathematical wonder, that phenomenon.
Hmm.
Because so before I joined the world of finance, I was studying electrical engineering, and I had a lot of interest on the maths and science part. And there is this property called emergence, and you see that when different groups of otherwise not very intelligent pieces come together, and if they come together and they coordinate, they create a super intelligent network.
Hmm.
Now you see this in nature, you see this in fungal structures, in the way that fungi grow underneath, how they connect trees, and how the intelligence kind of works there. You see this in ant colonies, where each individual ant has a very simple function to do,
Hmm.
but collectively they can kind of thrive as a population. And most interestingly, and it would be something easier for our audience to kind of relate to as well, because we're using this technology medium to have this conversation. So our technologies, all of our artificial intelligence, from very basic to now our movement towards general intelligence, all of that is happening using the semiconductor technology. And at the heart of it, the semiconductor technology is a very dumb operation. It is an on and off switch. It's a zero or a one, right? It's not rocket science. It's
Hmm.
very basic intelligence. It is very simple operation. You either zero or you one. You either on or you off. You on, you off. You on, you off. But you put billions of these semiconductors together, and you can compute quantum equations on there. You can come up with cutting edge research on string theory on there. So that's the power of coordination. That's the power of emergence. So I
Hmm.
definitely am 100% sold on that idea. And I think even if we can get a fraction of that going in human societies, because I think we are far away in our evolution cycle to kind of reach it's a army general's dream almost to get that sort of coordination going. um, but how do I go about approaching that in my workplace? um, I, I do it based on what brings me satisfaction.
Mm,
So like I said at the start of the call, there was a part of me which was quite dissatisfied with the rat race, first 6 7 years into the industry, and I was like, come on, my life can't just be about numbers and making more money and more money and more money and then die one day. I want to do something of purpose, something of meaning and stuff like that. And I went searching for it. But over the last 6 to 7 years, i've I've found that sense of belonging by making the workplace as fun as possible as I can for myself. And that's a non-negotiable for me. The reason being, I'm spending easily 70 to 80% of my wakeful hours either thinking about work or actually doing work. And if that's not bringing me joy, that's not bringing me fun, then I've compromised the biggest area of my life. So, point number one would be I want to make my life as fun as possible. And that cannot happen if people around me are not having the maximum amount of fun possible that they can have
mm,
in their lives. I can't be surrounded by people who are tired and grumpy and they want to do anything but this job and I'm having fun. That's just not possible. So that's my responsibility to ask the right sort of questions, to engage people as human beings and ask them, hey, what would make it fun for you? And let's do more of that and some more of that. And we may try and fail, but we'll figure it out and we try and have more and more fun. And so when I'm hiring people in my team, one of the things that I'm looking for is this person going to have fun? Is this person going to derive joy out of what they're doing? And if yes, then 90% of my job is done. Then
mm,
I don't have to really worry about, hey, will this person know the right DCF model? I mean, I know those things are very important, but I'm there to kind of mentor them and teach them and also learn from them. But if that mindset is there, that hey, you know what, I want to come to this job because it brings me so much joy, so much fun, then that's it. Most of my job is done there because collectively we'll figure it out. And that's how I kind of approach that emergence, that
mm,
coordination.
mm,
At the base of it, even though we're talking systems, these systems are made up of human beings. And if human beings are being treated like human beings, if human beings are being valued like human beings, then human beings will turn up as human beings. If we expect human beings to turn up as machines, that's a race we lost a long time ago.
mm. It's uh, it's interesting about one of the things that when you start learning about systems thinking, Dr. Deming teaches that you would stop individually rewarding people through individual KPIs, as an example, one of the most favorite things out there in the business world these days, because doing individual KPIs and sometimes department or division level KPIs actually sets people against each other.
Hmm.
Because if you have individual KPIs, uh, it can ultimately there's a bonus pool, and people are going to get it or not when you tie the performance appraisal with compensation. And so I've thought a lot about that and how do we get more out of our businesses. And I would say that one way is to start to understand that managing in a systems type of management is complex, it's difficult, it's harder than just siloing everything and thinking you're going to get, you know, the best out of everybody by everybody doing their best. But that's not how it works. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I'm a supporter of the fact that nobody wins until everybody wins. So I think in the incentive system, there's definitely got to be a layer of that. So I personally advocate for some sort of a metric which defines overall company success
Mm,
and associating a big part of the reward incentive to that. Um, And as far as the individual performance is concerned, I think for me, that's important too. But more on an understanding of, okay, how do we want this person's career to progress,
Mm,
and at which pace do we want that to happen, and are they being able to achieve that? So like I said, I want to create an environment where people come in and they don't have to doubt themselves every morning of like, do I want to do this job or not?
mm,
Hey, I want to wake up and I want to do this job. But in order to kind of create that sort of a thing, you need to reward that sort of a mindset. And you also need to have repercussions for mindset that can take that for granted, because that's an easily gamified system as well. Like, okay, this person that he just wants everything to be fun, so I'm going to come and crack some jokes and I'm not going to do any work. That just doesn't fly.
mm, mm,
So long as you kind of keep the garden healthy, then you've got to put some trust back in the garden and you got to reward the right sort of things as well. But yes,
mm,
the garden's not healthy if just one or two roses are kind of fragrant and everything else is rotting.
mm,
So overall, I think, um, yeah, maybe the way to think about it is like when you think about the overall budget allocation for how much bonuses are going to be this year, you think about how well the company has performed, and then within that, if you want to have some variance, then that is individual performance based. Because
mm,
I think both of them need to be looked into as well. Because also I think from experience, what I've seen is if there are no checks and balances in place for rewarding the right sort of behavior or punishing the wrong sort of behavior, then the likelihood that the bad apples will turn good apples is
mm.
near zero, and
Right.
it's more likely that all the good apples will turn into bad apples as well.
We're going to wrap up in just a little bit, but let's just say hi to some of the other people here. Ritesh, one of our graduates from the Valuation Masterclass Boot Camp. Good to see you. And the rock star CFO of Bangkok, according to Wimon
Hi,
Kogar.
Vimal.
Yes. Okay. And we have Hillary, who's in Nigeria. He's the one that mentioned about Howard Bloom talks about the beast, which he made me. As you were talking, I skipped over and went to Amazon to see what he was talking about. Um, and then, of course, Alex is out there enjoying the conversation. So good to see Alex. What I want to do is maybe wrap up by asking you uh, to give some piece of advice because you've had, you know, you've gone a different path. You've tried different things. You've taken breaks, as you said, to go, learn about acting and other, stuff. Maybe you could give some advice for young people who are just starting their career in finance. What would you tell them? What do you think would be good for them?
I think the first one would be a bit generic, sort of philosophical response. I'd say be a good friend to yourself. I think the greatest source of wisdom comes from taking your own advice. I think a lot of us always have good advice to give, but seldom do we see ourselves practicing it. So, and that's not to say that, hey, if you kind of set yourself a high standard and you're not meeting up to it, then you start to beat yourself up. Um, I don't see much value to be derived from that sort of negative self-talk either. So be a good friend to yourself, and you don't spoil your friend, and you don't berate your friend. You just be a good friend to yourself. So I think whatever that means to you, follow that. Um, as far as my personal finance journey has been concerned, so I came from an engineering background, and the reason why I was selected by the investment banking industry in London was there's this idea that science and math students are numerically capable, and we need people who can think on their feet and have a problem solving attitude. So whichever area you kind of see yourself solving problems, it could be solving problems for your family, it could be solving problems for yourself, it could be solving problem for your personal finances, getting your student loans, thinking about your future, you're faced with a catastrophe. Use all of that as an opportunity and a blessing to kind of see, okay, what are the skills that I'm picking up from here, because you never know how those are going to be applied.
Mm,
So everything that happens to you, especially the nasty things in life, are a great source of education. So remember that, and that's always training you to kind of be contributing later on in your life to somebody else who might be facing that same problem and who will thank you a ton because you had gone through that experience previously and now you've got some valuable advice for them. Um, the second thing that happened to me on my career path was education. And again, a source of inspiration in Andrew. You were the president of the CFA Society in the early days when I was studying for those exams. So definitely studying for the CFA curriculum gave me a
Mm,
very broad and in-depth view on everything finance related. So continue to educate yourself. And again, you know it best. There is no recipe. I would personally recommend the CFA program to young finance professionals for sure. Not only because of the content and the skill set that it provides you with, but also in this very fast-paced world of ours, as soon as somebody sees your name, comma CFA, that means something, right? That's already kind of sold itself to a certain audience. I'm not saying
mm.
that that's for everybody, but there is a certain audience out there which is like, okay, this guy, he's got it. So continue to educate yourself, and there is no right time.
Mm.
Wherever you are, whatever it is you're doing, if you continue to do your best over there, you'll surprise yourself. And as finance professionals, we should never forget the impact of compounding. You do one tiny thing over and over, one tiny good thing over and over and over and over again, and you look back in a year's time or 5 years time, and your mind will be blown of how much you've transformed yourself.
So true. So true. In fact, I set a goal last month that I would do one sun salutation in yoga for each day of the month. So on the first day I did one, second day I did two, and third day I did three. And it was a linear rise. But by the time I got to the 31st day, which then took a half an hour to do, there were exponential gains that I was feeling in my body. So I think consistent, even consistent linear action, same thing, getting a little bit better leads to exponential returns in the future. So I think that's, a good reminder. Well, I want to thank you for coming on Careers in Finance, and it's great to get to know your story. And I had kind of I hadn't been up to date on some of it. Like I didn't realize about the acting, which was good, and that was cool. But it's good to learn more about what you've got and what you're doing. And I think for the listeners and the viewers out there who are debating about what type of career in finance that they want to build, I think you've given an example of working in the sell side, working on, in the asset and wealth management and seeing the broad picture, and then going to work in a company, and how you've described to us that that's brought a wider perspective into the company. Now, there's also people that work in companies that later to go, for instance, to be an analyst, or they may be an
Hmm.
excellent analyst in pharmaceutical because they were deep in pharmaceutical. But I think what you're talking about is, a great way to go. So thanks a lot. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
uh, just an honor being here, Andrew, and I'm seeing some of the comments kind of come through.
Mm.
So really grateful for you guys tuning in today. Hopefully you received something that was useful, and if there is anything that I can help you with, then please feel free to get in touch. I'm here in Bangkok.
Yep, fantastic. All right, we're gonna wrap up the show. I'm gonna see you in just a minute, Ved, and we'll talk a little bit more. So thanks again for coming on, and ladies and gentlemen, that is another episode of Careers in Finance. Remember, Careers in Finance is brought to you by Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. Just go to valuationmasterclass.com/bootcamp or scan the QR code, and you can learn more about building a competitive advantage in the area of company valuation. Wasn't that a great discussion with Ved? I enjoyed it very much, and there's a lot to learn. I'll see you all in the next Careers in